Greetings fellow gorehounds and welcome back to another Blood Splattered vlog. So we're once again doing another 2016 catch-up movie with The Eyes of My Mother, which is a movie I got recommended quite a lot from you guys out there in the audience, so thank you very much. Because I actually do dig this movie. I don't think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I absolutely enjoyed it. It's a really interesting character study, and I was actually really surprised with where it went. And I'm not even gonna get into what the plot of this movie is, because it's really hard to dial down without getting into spoilers, so I'll save that for the spoiler section. But things I can say about the movie is that I really like the visual style of this film. It's shot in black and white, first off, and it's got really long, deliberate shots. And even the editing is super on point because every time it lingers on something just long enough for you to guess what's gonna happen next, it'll cut to something and it'll be completely the opposite of what you expected. Sometimes for comedic effect and other times for complete shocking effect. It was really clever and it allowed for these little mysteries that kept me engaged throughout the entire movie. Not that the movie really is a mystery itself, though you do spend a lot of time trying to figure out the motivations of the main characters. Which should be a detriment, but actually works in this movie's favor. Because at least for me, I did find myself going like, wow, that is a weird reaction to the situation, but I'm curious as to where this is going. And eventually, it would reveal the impetus behind the reaction, so all would make sense eventually. While still leaving just a little bit of what the fuck there, just to keep you going. Which I absolutely appreciated, because every time I was about to lose interest in the movie, because it is really slow, something would happen and I would go, oh shit, holy crap, I gotta keep paying attention. And the filmmaker taunts you with this, just when you're about to completely go, oh man, I should watch something else. Oh shit, this is happening now. And believe me, a lot of stuff happens in this movie that I could not have predicted. That's not to say it's super wild like a movie like The Greasy Strangler, which is just balls to the wall, what the fuck. This movie is a lot more subtle in its approach, and it is way less of a comedy, even though it has dark humor. In fact, the tone of this movie reminded me of a movie I watched earlier and vlogged earlier this year called Darling, which was a total Polanski worship of a movie that I felt like didn't quite live up to its promise, while still being good, whereas this movie I actually feel completely lives up to its promise. And yeah, much like Darling, this movie has some Polanski worship, but not to the effect that Darling did. Darling went all the way with it, which I'll always give that movie credit for, even if I felt that movie was missing something. This movie, on the other hand, I don't think is missing a thing. I think this movie is perfect the way it is. That being said, I should still warn you that it is, like I said earlier, pretty slow. And it is absolutely the kind of pretentious art house film that you would expect film school students to eat up. But unlike some movies like Felt, this movie is actually really good. It's well acted, it's well written, and really well directed. And I guarantee when this movie starts, you will have no idea where it ends up. And with that all said, let us finally move on to the spoilers. Okay, so this movie opens up with a little girl in a Portuguese family in I'm pretty sure what's supposed to be America. But it's hard to tell because they live on a farm, kind of isolated from the rest of society. Though later on, there are things that pretty much indicate that yeah, absolutely, this is set in America, not the least of which being the news they're listening to. Which isn't in Portuguese and is very much feels like American radio. Though interestingly enough, I couldn't quite tell what time period this movie was set in because while the radio and the television seem to be playing like old shit, there are other aspects of the movie like the foreign exchange student she meets at some point in the movie that felt really modern. So I'm not exactly sure if this was supposed to take place in the modern day or if it was supposed to take place in a part of the world where it is just that far behind. Anyway, my point is, we're introduced to a little girl who's being taught the basics of Portuguese surgery from her mother. Because it turns out, back when her mother used to live in Portugal, she used to be a surgeon. And so she's explaining to her how they used to like dissect cows before they dissected humans back in Portugal, while she's cooking dinner and actually taking meat off of a dead cow. So right away you get the impression that this is a girl who has a laissez-faire attitude towards dead bodies as a result of her mother's upbringing. Also a result of living on a farm where they had to kill their own animals, so that contributed as well. But then one day, she's outside picking some flowers and this creepy white motherfucker shows up. And I mean white as in this guy looks like the nerdiest white dude you've ever done seen, and he can't stop smiling and it's fucking creepy. And he asks them if he can use the bathroom, and then when he gets inside, he pulls out a gun and threatens her mom. Next thing we know, the father arrives and he basically walks in on the mother being just fucking mutilated by this guy in the bathroom. So he fights the guy and knocks him out, but then this is when the movie starts to go in directions that you really don't expect. Alright, so right away the daughter and the father kind of just sit silently with one another following this death and like the knocking out of the guy. They decide to go out and basically bury the mom, and they don't seem to be having like a full emotional reaction. It's kind of as if they're closed off to it. And at first you're like, are they keeping it inside, or are they just so numb to dead bodies that they just see it as another dead body? And it turns out the answer is yes and no, but I'll get to that in a minute. The more important thing is they end up taking the guy who killed her mom and chaining him inside the barn. So it's kind of like Lucky McGee's The Woman, except instead of a cannibalistic wild woman being chained in the barn, it's now this creepy, possibly pedophilic serial killer being chained in the barn. Actually, I'm not sure if he's pedophilic, but he definitely gave the little girl some really creepy looks. And so yeah, it then cuts to them sitting down watching TV while the guy is screaming in the barn, and the dad says, oh, you should really deal with this. And I'm just like, hold on, what the fuck is happening here? Like, I all of a sudden have no idea where this movie is going. So the little girl goes into the garage and then has a conversation with the guy where he talks about how killing is the greatest thrill he has ever felt. To which she responds without any emotion with cutting out his vocal cords and cutting out his eyes and sewing them shut. So now he can't see and he can't speak. And while she's doing this, she also says that he's gonna be her best friend. Because her mom was her best friend and she's dead, so now he's gonna be her best friend. Which at this point I'm going, oh, fuck, what the shit is this? But then we get a scene of the dad going into the bathroom and then taking a bath in the bathtub and completely breaking down. So it's like, okay, alright, so the dad actually has been keeping the emotions in. He actually does care that the wife is dead. But we've yet to get that kind of reaction from the daughter outside of what she did to the guy, but that seemed to be completely separate from what he did to her mom. We then get a scene of the daughter asking the dad to dance with her, and so they dance with one another, and then it cuts to like a time jump. Now she's an adult, and the dad has seemingly died in his sleep. And one of the subtle things they show here is that clearly, like, since she was a little girl, she still sleeps in her dad's bed. Which is weird and kind of creepy, and I don't know if that indicates they were sleeping with one another, but, like, I don't know, like, the movie doesn't quite make that clear. But the fact it was a possibility is creepy enough. And it turns out this whole time since the daughter's been growing up, she's been feeding and basically treating the guy in the barn as if it was her pet. But now that her dad is dead, she's lonely again, so she goes out to a bar to pick up someone. And this was another great example of the editing where you're expecting one thing and then it does the opposite. It's like this static shot of her walking into the bar and you're like, okay, so it's gonna cut with her and a guy or something like that, right? No, it cuts with her and she's going home with a girl, which was something I was not expecting at all. It was like, all of a sudden, lesbians! Which is hands down one of the greatest all of a suddens in movie history. And so she talks about her mom getting murdered, and then the girl she took home starts to get a little uncomfortable, but she's still not scared off because, I mean, hey, it's not her fault that her mom got murdered. But then she admits that it was her who killed her dad, which was like, whoa, hold on, what the fuck? What's going on? The girl she took home tries to get away, and then it cuts and she's already killed her and chopped her up. Which normally I'd be like, oh man, you cut out the good part, but actually I really loved that cut. It was a nice smash cut. And it was super effective to just like see her like just scrubbing up all the blood from what obviously was just a horrific murder. But then the girl decides to dance in front of her dad's dead body and then bathe her dad, and this is when she starts to break down. She's crying about her dad being dead and missing him, and crying about her mother being dead and missing her. Which was really bizarre to me because I was like, well, then if you miss your dad, why did you kill him? What's going on here? But it's very clear that she's not entirely stable, so I mean, it kind of makes sense that it's not 100% clear. But then she brings the guy from the barn upstairs and sleeps with him. Like, just flat out, it cuts to her putting him on the bed and then taking off her clothes and then climbing on top of him, and then, like, cuts to the next morning. Because she realizes, oh shit, he's not in the bed with her. Where did he go? And it turns out he's trying to escape, so she goes outside, stabs him to death, and then he's dead. And it is at that point in the movie in which I'm going to stop talking about the spoilers and leave the ending to all of you to find out for yourself. But needless to say, it's fucked up, it's gnarly, it's completely over the top, and it's heart-wrenching. And I highly recommend it. It's a really good movie. It's a little art housey, but in a good way. And if you are or ever were a film student like I was, then you'll probably really appreciate this movie. Anyway, my fellow gorehounds, I caught this movie on Amazon Instant Watch, so if you want to go see it, check it out there or on other on-demand formats. And with that all said, peace out, my fellow gorehounds, and I'll catch y'all later.